By way of introduction, I'm Jeremy Adams,
I'm Rebecca Dittmar.
and we are from two different companies, but we care about some of the same things. I look after the ecosystem at Dagger,
And I'm a software engineer at Nike.
and we're going to talk a little bit about pipelines as code, impact for developers, and we're going to talk a little bit about some new stuff that's happening in the Dagger sphere. Who saw the keynote this morning?
Right.
Okay, so like half the folks did or so. So this is cool. So some of you that didn't, you'll get caught up, and some of you that did, maybe I'll show you a little something different that you haven't seen before, hopefully. So Rebecca, given that you work, she said, don't ask me like a direct, hard question on the spot that we haven't rehearsed before, but I'm going to go for it anyway.
Well, I don't want to talk to the attorneys later, so.
Oh, that's right. Okay, do you have like a disclaimer that you have to use?
When I do development work for unknown places and
Yes. Yeah.
clients, I've noticed the state of CI/CD in 2025 is fairly similar to what it was in 2023 and 2021.
Yeah, some things never change, eh?
There's a lot of YAML. There's a lot of pushing and praying. A lot of the pipelines I have experience with might get to like 30 minutes and then it fails on a whiz scan. Or a Cypress test fails. And you're
totally.
pretty committed, you're already all the way in there. And of course it's when you're on production support and there's an emergency. That's when it usually has a problem. So not a whole lot of improvement. As much as we're all trying.
Sadly, okay. Does that resonate with folks here, that there's challenges out there in CI/CD land? Who runs CI/CD here? Okay. And who is a consumer of the CI platform as well? Okay.
Thank you all for your service.
Yes, yeah. And for other folks, are you just kind of CI curious? Or, what? Yes, okay, yeah, so there's a little bit of interest. So we're going to try and see if we can help with that. So this idyllic scene you see here of this little software factory chugging along, pushing out the releases, right? That's what we like to see and imagine. But it turns out that, as you grow and maybe just, as time goes on, things get a little bit more like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess it's not just the traditional CI stuff that you're seeing out there?
No, now we're having a lot of these AI-fueled tools, which just seems more confusing.
Yeah. There is. We'll start with the CI challenges, and we'll get to some of the AI stuff as we go along.
Sounds good.
So this is, I guess, this is kind of what you're talking about. Where there was a time, and a simpler time, when you start out and your pipeline maybe looks like the one on the left. It's a little bit of GitHub Actions YAML, not too much, just a little simple build and test and just push that thing out there. And then, as things go along, I imagine there's more to worry about and things.
Right, you have an infrastructure change or something like that,
Yeah.
Start adding files because you're wanting to deploy to more than one place, for example. Yeah.
Just more complexity.
More complexity.
And this happens as things mature. And it gets to a point where, as a consumer of the CI, I'm guessing you're not in there you're just more trying to use it versus debug it, or do you have to try and intuit what's happening as well?
Right, you got to figure it out. It's just the goal is make it work.
Right, just make it work. Make it so I can ship my software.
I have things I'm trying to get out there, and I don't want this in my way.
Right, and then there's someone else.
Sorry, CI people.
Someone like some of these people out here in the audience actually have to deal with that state on the right side. Is that, so who's running thousands of lines of YAML or hundreds or thousands? Yeah, so this is what happens, and it becomes, is the frowny face sort of appropriate? Okay, as you try and reason about what's happening inside of this stuff. So you get to this state, and I think Rebecca said it, where you're just I'm going to push the button, I'm going to push my code to Git, or I'm going to do, and hope it's going to work.
Right.
There's not a lot of guarantee, because even though you probably got it.
Yeah, I ran all this stuff already, and it passed.
Yeah,
so,
using your own tooling.
Yeah, using my own laptop. And then, it's when I'm pushing it that there's a problem.
So is it, I would hazard to guess that you're not running those thousands of lines of GitHub Actions or GitLab YAML on your laptop.
Correct.
You were doing something else.
Right.
Developer magic, whatever.
Well, I'm building, I'm running tests, I'm trying to make sure there aren't problems.
So you've got your own set of tools that are different than what the CI team has provided you.
Apparently, yes.
Right.
It's a black box.
Well, and then I'm channeling then from like the platform side as well. Like, I'll tell you, I'm sorry. So if I'm, maybe I'm that role today, but it turns out that we just moved, from Jenkins. Well, most of the org moved from Jenkins, but we're still a little bit on Jenkins. And then we also had to adopt, GitHub Actions. But then we also bought that other company. Remember the acquisition last year? Well, they were on GitLab, and we haven't moved. So we've got like X number of YAMLs, and they're not all. You can't just say YAML. It's not the same, right?
Vestigial Circle CI.
Oh,
yeah.
There's some of that floating around. Sure, there's a little bit of everything. So again, very, very challenging. And debugging these things, let me tell you, you think that you understand what's happening because you've put enough like comments inside of your YAML, but it turns out that there's a link to a shell script that has a link to some network service that has. It's just quite a challenge. So thanks for bearing with us. But maybe there's a better way out there. Maybe there's something else we could do. Okay, so now I'm going to switch. I'm going to put on more of a Dagger hat for a second and talk about one possible way we could get out of this nightmare state between, that Rebecca and I are both dealing with from two sides. So if you don't know Dagger, open source project that provides kind of a programmable build engine would be one way to think about the Dagger engine. Another way to think about it is that it is a composable kind of runtime. So, like you're used to running things like containers or something like that, that's on a runtime, like on Docker or Kubernetes. So Dagger is itself a runtime, and it's all driven by an API. So under the hood, there's all these primitives in Dagger that let you work with things that you care about, like containers you might want to build things inside of or produce, directories full of content, artifacts that you're building, files, etc., working with Git repos. So all these kind of building blocks that you might use if you're building software, if you're building a software factory of your own, and it's all in one API. It turns out to be a GraphQL API. If you're interested, come see me after. That image is crazy, is not. Let's try and push the button. I've got to push the button. It says if the...
Push and pray.
It's if your slides are not displaying, it says up here, push the button. So we're pushing the button.
Oh.
And it's in progress. So we push. Oh, okay, cool, thank you. Yeah, I don't know, it just said to push the button, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to...
Push it again, that's what I do.
Oh yeah, push it again.
Just
See
keep
if that
pushing.
fixes it. Is that so this is like the flip side of push and pray is the resource. Oh, look at that. See? Sometimes you just got to keep pushing until it works, right? But I mean, you talked about that too.
That's what I do for a job. That's my career.
So wait a second. When I'm sitting there and Jenkins says that it's like no more resources left because
Oh my God.
is that a thing?
It's such a thing. I mean, not to speak directly about my job, but I've seen times
Right.
where
right.
all of us are pushing at the same time, usually 3 p.m. on Thursday. And everything just gets totally crushed and nothing's passing and it's all failing and I'm restarting agents and I'm dumping half of people's workloads and yelling at them gently
Yes.
in a Slack channel.
So it's a challenge. Sometimes we do all push the button several times, and sometimes sometimes they can slow things down. So the idea with the Dagger engine system is that you have this single API, but then we have a set of SDKs in languages that you might already know and love. So like Go or TypeScript or Python or Java or PHP, Elixir. There's a whole bunch of SDKs that let you access this same API. And you can also get to it through the command line, through a shell, and I'll show you that in a little bit. And then everything is executed sandboxed in containers kind of automatically with a really good caching, and it all just kind of just works out of the box. It all operates in a DAG if you're into that sort of thing, into those graphs, and that's how everything works. And then OTel is streaming out of everything automatically. So what you see a little later on the terminal user interface, the TUI, or what you see in our web UI. It's all the same OTel, open telemetry, spraying around there. So, and then you see on the far right side, one other piece that's really important is the community sharing content they're building. So you can take these core primitives and compose them into functions that are then reusable. So I could like take, you know, a directory of source code and a container to execute things in, and pretty soon I've like developed my build process, and I can make that a new thing that other people could use. So you can find tons of things like that in the Daggerverse, and they're all multi-language, right? One person wrote one in Python, another person wrote one in TypeScript or Go or whatever, but because they all have the same API under the hood, I could be writing something in Java, and I can just import, you know, install somebody else's TypeScript module or their Python module. So then as a platform team, you could build a platform and say, oh yeah, front-end folks, encapsulate, please, your knowledge of how the build should go in TypeScript, say.
Right.
And then we'll have another team that likes to use Go, the cloud native team. We have another team that uses Python.
Not to hammer the phrase, but you go from push and pray to plug and play.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down later. So here is a taste of some code. We're gonna get into some deep demos here in a second, but here's just a little primer on some code. So this is a new function. If I wrote this and I had this in the Dagger module, this would be a build that doesn't exist in the core API, but it's using things from the core API. So you can see down at the bottom, we ask the DAG for a container from a certain image. We want to load a certain image, the Nginx image, and then add a directory of content to it and expose a port. And now you've just built a web service, say. Up above, you can see I'm referencing another function off screen called build-env. And the build environment might have like, you know, something that loads up all the node dependencies and then builds them, extracts the directory with the built website. How does that work again? Like when you're building web, I don't do front end stuff, but I know that there's tools for things like this. I know there's ways to like build a production website, pack it up or something like that.
Webpack, Vite, for
Okay,
example.
things like that.
I think we're going to
Webpack.
look at Vite later.
Vite later? Is that okay?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think it's
I
a
don't quite understand all these things, but I
VU
know
and V, yeah.
Okay, I know maybe Vite. We might see the word Vite, and then she can point it out to me. But you know, we build a website, pull that thing, and stick it into. You can see the site down there in the lower right. So it's like a multi-stage Docker build, if you're familiar with that. Kind of a very similar flavor. So again, really, this is how you would use Dagger to build functions that, in this case, take in a directory full of source code and give out a container. Then if I wanted to call that build function, I could do so right from the CLI. So I could say like Dagger call the build function on my CLI and run it. Or I could then put that into Jenkins or GitLab or Circle CI or GitHub Actions so that now I have a way for Becca or any front engineer could like run Dagger build, even stick that in your package JSON, I guess.
In TypeScript, which I like.
Yeah, you could even run that, exactly. And then I could also have it running in CI. So now, instead of us having works on my laptop but not in CI because they're two completely different things happening, here is like the same things happening in both places, so it works in both places. All right, so that would, you know, we saw what we're calling it on the command line looks like. And then down below, you can see if you just call Dagger on its own, you get a Dagger shell. It's like a REPL, you know, a shell you can work with and you can play in. So once you've loaded up a module in the REPL, you can start calling those functions there too. So I can call build, and I can start chaining the functions. That little pipe operator, very much like a bash kind of an homage, right? So I could say build and then pipe it to up to bring up a running service. Or build gives us a container. I can also get a terminal into that container. Build could also, I could publish that container to a registry. You get the kind of the flavor of that. So let's actually show that now in action, right? Enough slides for a minute? Okay, I'll show it in action now. So to do that, I'm going to switch over here to a project that I have running. Oh, this is actually running. Okay, I'm going to stop this right now. And then we're going to like take a look first at the code, so you can see that there's something really here. And, okay, there's that word I think you were talking about. Here we go. So
Feet, I spotted it.
yeah, you said Vite. Okay. So this is a, let's look in the source directory. This is a Vue app.
Yep.
Is that right? So, okay, you know, React, Vue, these TypeScript, JavaScript frameworks. There's a lot of them out there. Okay, so this is a Vue app. And so none of this is Dagger that we're seeing here. This is just this app that's a website app. But in here, I've also Daggerized this project. So, you know, much like when you want to take a project that you have and then you want to be able to automate things about it, like its build, its tests, its deployments, or whatever. So we've actually run in this thing, Dagger init, and then I gave it an SDK. So I could, in this case, I said the SDK equals TypeScript, but I could have said in here just as well Go or Python or whatever SDK I want to use. This one's already been initialized, and you can tell that because it's got this a Dagger JSON in here. And you can see that this is written in TypeScript. Okay. So where is the implementation? Well, it's in that .dagger directory. And in there, there's actually, let's look in the .dagger directory. This is the kind of the structure of it. There's a source with the index HTML or index.typescript in it. So let's take a look at that inside of the .dagger directory. Cool. All right, so this is some Dagger code in TypeScript, and this is going to look very similar to what we had on the slide a second ago. On that slide, we had something that said we were going to use this build environment, and let me make this a little prettier. There we go. So we were going to get this build environment, which is down below, and we were going to run like that, and we were going to run, execute a build, an npm run build inside, and then we were going to extract one directory out of there and store that into the build variable here, and then we're going to start a new container, and we're going to get build going right there. So for folks that want to see that other piece of code, here's the build environment at the bottom. Again, it takes in a directory full of source code, gives out a container. The way it works is it sets up some caching for the node modules that we're going to get from npm install, and it uses a certain image, a node image, so it can load all those things up. So this is just kind of like showing you what's in this module. There's also a test function that runs npm run test, so kind of like our way we want to do tests. And then up here, it's got a publish, which is publishing, in this case, to some ephemeral image registry, ttl.sh. It's like pushing to Docker Hub or ECR or GCR or GAR or whatever. So this is cool, but let's actually like use this thing. So this is how I would use it. I'm in this project. It's been Daggerized. And if you're interested, you can go to Dagger's doc site and look at the quick start, and this is essentially what the quick start exercise is. But I'm going to run Dagger here, which will throw us into the Dagger shell. So now I'm in the Dagger shell, and I can start tabbing and saying, hey, what's available in here? So you can see there's a bunch of core types, like a container, directory, Git, so forth. But there's also functions that we saw from the code a second ago, like build. So I'm going to run build here, and it's going to do all the things we saw in the build. So if I go up here, I can say, oh, okay, let's actually increase the verbosity a little bit. These are all the sorts of the things that happen inside of this build. And you can see cached on a lot of the things on the right. That's because anything that can be cached is automatically cached, so you don't have to run it again and waste time and resources. Okay, so that's looking good. So now that I've run this, let's actually run the build again, but let's bring it up. So what this is doing, it's built the website, which it was able to build really fast because it's in the cache. And now it started a tunnel locally to localhost 80. And here's the website. This is apparently...
Very complicated.
It's very complicated. And
Lot
look at
going
that. It's got a clicky button. That's pretty cool, right? Okay, so that's the website. So, and it turns out, Control-C that, And it turns out that this build, actually, remember, right now I'm taking in a default source, the source code that was right in the directory. But I could also specify some other source code here as well. So I could say, hey, actually, as the source, give me from GitHub, this is called hello Dagger TypeScript, and I want to get it from a slightly different branch than the main branch. So I want to build it from this other branch called the green branch. Aha, okay, and I want to bring that up. Let's see what's happening there. Let's quit in case I've got, might have too many services trying to run on port 80 here. Let's try that again. There we go. And let's go to that one, reload. Oh, check it out. I'm on the green branch.
Ooh la la.
Yeah, the green branch has got some very big improvements, like a giant green button. So
That'll take 1 week for me to make. I'm sorry. I have to wait.
hey, you got to set your boundaries, you know. So this kind of gives you a little bit of like a sense of, right, you know, how you could work with the functions that are inside of this module. Now, the other kind of the cool thing is that you can, because of the caching, it's really fun to iterate this way. So I could say, like I said, I could say build, and then I can, you know, actually get a terminal inside of that as well. So I'm in a terminal inside of the built container. So now I can say like, oh, show me what the, you know, Etsy, nginx.conf looks like in this container, for example, right? Other things I could do is I could also publish this container, you know, as an image, for example. So these are, and the reason I can do that is if I hit tab, all of these are functions that are available for the container type. Everything's like really strictly typed. So I can do any of these things, including getting a terminal, publishing. I could also say something like, you know, give me with a new file or something like that, and add in a file. So you can see this chaining is what works really well for doing builds or for a number of other things. So now that we've kind of got that foundation, and this could be just kind of for fun, you can also use, we're using this local module that you just saw there, but I could also do something like this. So I could say, like, let's bring up this site that we have, our green site, and then let's go over here and let's like actually share this site with all of you. So I'm going to run ngrok. Anyone run that at all? So ngrok, just for folks that haven't used it, it's just kind of a fun way of sharing something like that. So I'm going to have all of you, if you're interested, I'm going to throw up a QR code here in a second, and then you can use ngrok to connect to my local machine and see what I'm seeing. Anyway, it's kind of a fun thing. So I'm going to take this like one-time address it's giving me here. I need some way to transmit it to all of you. And so to make that easy on myself, I'm going to use another module I wrote that's called my QR module. And this is one, instead of in TypeScript, I wrote this one in Python. And it was like, it's a very, very simple little module. All it does is it generates a QR code. Basically, if it's supposed to be a QR, a part of it's supposed to be there, it makes this little ASCII bit. And so let's just try it. So I'm going to run this module. You can see it actually works because I did it before. But we're going to run, I'm inside of the QR module. I'm going to use the generate ASCII QR function that it has, and I'm going to put in this URL. And so this is going to run, and this is going to generate a QR code. So I'm going to see, and any of you that want to see could look at this as well, see if it actually comes up. There we go. You can do it from here. You might have to say, visit the site. I visit the site. I've got a Dagger site with a green button. So you're getting that off of my machine. But it's just kind of like it's kind of fun to see that. And if we go back over here to here. You can see where all the people that wanted to connect here, those are the folks that all connected in and grabbed these assets down there. So it's kind of a fun way. And what it's showing is that I can run modules in different ways. I can use a module, and actually I could run that just straight from the command line without having Python installed or without having whatever that SDK language that I have. I don't need to have any TypeScript on my machine. I don't need to have any. I don't need to have that runtime myself because Dagger provides a containerized runtime to run all this stuff in. So then, cool. So we've shown some stuff that's pretty useful for CI. You could imagine doing builds, and you could imagine doing tests and a number of other things. And we got to see Dagger Shell doing that stuff. But it turns out there was some new stuff that we talked about. These LLMs and AI and assistants, and I don't know if you ever seen it.
Should I describe the problem that I wanted you to solve for me?
Please.
Okay. So I'm trying to wrap my head around how all of this works, because conceptually I'm still, trying to figure out how it works. So I watched a bunch of demos of how they're injecting LLMs into Dagger, and came up with a very simple concept, which was to save me from having to write end-to-end tests based on a GitHub diff. So I made a diff. There's a difference between branch A and branch B. I would have to write a test for that typically, but why not have an AI agent write it for me and then poop it out, and then I just throw it up in the project, and boom, I'm done.
Right.
Wouldn't that be great?
Get yourself an intern, right?
Basically, yeah.
Who could help you with this.
Right.
So cool. So in the same vein of what we saw already, and you maybe saw the LLM primitive kind of float by when I was in the shell earlier, we do have a new primitive in Dagger that is for connecting LLMs into your software. And so kind of like you see in the lower right there, our approach was rather than have to say like, oh, I'm just going to go pay a subscription to some big, LLM company that has their, and they give me an app for accessing it. I'm going to use Claude Desktop, or I'm going to use some, special thing from OpenAI.
Well, yeah, we've got like 5 co-pilots already at work.
Okay, so you got a bunch
very different ones, and they output different things, and they're loaded with limited information and maybe aren't so easy to use. And I'm a control freak. I want to be able to control it all, and it just kind of feels, again, like that black box. I'm just throwing questions at it and getting back sometimes very useful responses.
But you'd like to take some control of this. You'd like to be able to use the LLM as a primitive, as another piece of the API, versus you having to go and ask it for stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So that was kind of our idea too. We think it's a powerful primitive, but we want you to be able to have control to build your own software with it. So to give you a little flavor of what it looks like, we're still, I think, in this project. And so let's go here, and let's just see if we have LLM available here. So I'm going to see if I have LLM. Actually, I'm going to actually, because it's more fun, we've got like this other branch of it over here. So to start out, I'm going to show you really quick just like how this works in practice so that you can get a feel for it. So we have this primitive called LLM, and I've got it hooked up to 1Password here so I can get my API token in there. And my LLM is, it's GPT-4o right now is what I'm connected to, but you could connect to any kind of open source LLM that you might have. It could be a local one like an Olama. It could be, whatever you want to use. And to your point, Rebecca, it can be good to have different LLMs that are that are good at coding or good at reasoning or good at composing text, right? That sort of thing. And you could orchestrate those together. So in this case, I've got this LLM, and the magic that we have with Dagger right now is you could actually say, hey, LLM, I'm going to hand you something to work with. I'm going to give you something to work with. And in this case, I could say, it could be very simple. I could say, like, hey, LLM, I'm going to give you a prompt, right? And so in this prompt, I could say, like, what color is the sky in Pasadena? right? And so this is going to send to the LLM this query. I'm getting this back from the LLM. And so this is like a pretty cool, this is kind of a very nice, tool, but we're doing this already in ChatGPT or anywhere else that you're doing this, right? So what's really innovative is the idea is if we could get in a conversation working on some kind of a goal together, if we get into an LLM agent loop. And so that's essentially what we're going to do now. So in this, I'm going to give you just a quick view into this. In this software, we've got a little place for the LLM to work so that it doesn't break everything. Remember, we want to keep things boxed up in containers and with a limited set of things the LLM is able to do that work in our direction, not just randomly. So here we're going to give it a container to work in. We're actually going to make this first example, kind of the lead up to Rebecca's desire, is to first be a real junior Go programmer. So in this case, we've got a Golang image here, and we've got 3 functions. This is all we're going to allow the LLM to use. And when we connect that LLM brain to this body, to this piece of software that we've written, we're going to essentially give it this workspace that has this container, and it has a build function where it can just run go build to see if the software it's writing works. It can write a single file to the container and kind of clobber the old container state, or it can read a file so kind of look around. That's it. So if we give it that, and then I load up Dagger again, and you'll notice that that was called Go program was the name of that function. So now I can give it an assignment like write me a curl clone, for example. And so what's going to actually happen here is we're going to fire up an LLM instance. We're going to attach this toy workspace, and we're going to have it go in a loop and have it try and create this, accomplish the assignment, essentially. And I'm going to actually, while this is running, I'm going to go to the web, and this is remember I said all the open telemetry that was streaming up, but we saw some on the terminal user interface. This same stuff is coming up here on this web interface. And we gave it a real pep talk. We told it it was an expert Go programmer, and we told it to do this assignment, and once it builds, it should let us know about it. And here is what it wrote as its Go program. Got a cool Go program, might work. And it tried to run it with Go build. It didn't work. It figured out why it didn't work, and it needed a go.mod. It did that, and it's like, hey, I did it. Here's the thing I did. So, and using the same kind of primitives that we had before, I should be able to now go in and run the same thing over, right out of the cache, jump into a terminal, and look around. And then sure enough, there's the assignment I gave it, write me a curl clone, and here's the code it wrote. And then I could say something like go build, similar to what it did to make sure things actually worked. And now I can see if this program it wrote, which is called curl clone, actually works. And we'll even get a fancy flag here for it. And I can say like that, boom. So there, that like worked. It wrote a piece of software, and the magic of this was that I just had it run in a loop until it was done. So we showed you the workspace it worked in. This is what it actually did. So when I actually ran this Go program, I gave it an assignment, and then it started up an LLM, just like we saw in the shell, and it got itself a toy workspace with that assignment and the pep talk. And we basically said, just keep going in a loop until you're done, and then give me back your results. So that's what you just saw. So now, to like Rebecca's point, what if we want to do something a little bit more ambitious? So in this case, what we're doing, you're like, bring it up.
I don't know if it's more ambitious, but
Okay.
directly useful to me at my job.
It would be useful in your job, okay. So maybe it's just the same. So here we've got a similar setup, but I've given it some slightly different tools, and we'll see if we can see the difference. So here I've actually got this function that I called Cypress test update. So we saw earlier we had the regular white button, boring, and the green button, Yeah, very exciting, right?
Very, very
Yeah,
pretty.
and that we see is in that project. And you see here, I'm not giving it a local directory. I could give it a local directory of content, but I'm actually pointing it at Git. And I'm saying, hey, grab this thing and pull it in. And luckily, we have some caching working in our favor. Oh, it needs a little key to get something as well. And now we've got some instructions for it to kind of run some tests. And let's see it do it. So it actually ran the first Cypress test to make sure that there was just the words, hello from Dagger in there. And now it's actually writing a test on its own. It's writing a new test, and we'll see if it actually works. And it's going to try and run both of the tests and see if they both still work. And so it looks like it's running the button style test that it made.
Might be better at naming files than I am.
And now it's got, it made a mistake. It didn't quite work. And it's like, oh, here, why don't you try and write it? Attempt this. Wait, it gave up? Well, maybe. Sometimes it does. And sometimes
It's only temporary execution error.
Ah, okay. Well, sometimes you want it to give up because sometimes, you don't want to just like burn all your tokens and waste all your money. And then sometimes you don't want it to give up. So actually, I have cooking show-like. I have one instance here where it actually was, where it was actually successful. And this is the curl clone. This is it writing a Cypress test update. And in this Cypress test update, you could see that it wrote a new test here, this button style test. And this one looks pretty simple. Let's see if we can actually get that guy to go, and then we'll actually jump in and look at it. So we'll run this again. More fingers crossed.
Now it's like a real engineer.
Like
Do it again.
Do it again. It's like earlier. It's like just keep pushing to get, see if it works. And then again, we can see this all happening. And actually, I'm going to increase the verbosity on this thing so we can see all this stuff happening. And you can actually get really verbose in the TUI as well and get like a lot of information. Let's actually resize that a little bit. Okay, round two. How do we feel? This one, it's spec test passed. Okay, there it is. Look at that. The wonder of, this is where you clap. The wonder, thank you. It was a good effort. There you go. Thank you very much. So here it successfully created a Cypress end-to-end test to ensure the button in the application has green button class and styling appropriate and so forth. So like, let's see, like, okay, again, it's this whole question of, okay, did you do it, right? So now we're going to actually look inside of this container that it was working inside of. And we're actually going to put that to bash. We'll take a look. So inside of this Cypress directory, there is an end-to-end directory in there. And oh, sure enough, in the original project, there's just this one Cypress test that says it should say hello from Dagger. And then this one, it actually creates a new test called button change. And this is the test that it created, right? So again, this works well because just like we saw when we were building up Dagger containers where we could like create a container, add a new directory into it, and that became something that we could then bring up as a service or publish or whatever. In the same way here, we could give a workspace container to an LLM and have it go back and forth and add files or directories onto here and execute commands until we got it to work. So this system that was really good for builds can also be really good for things like LLM agents, AI agents. If you're at all curious about kind of how that all works, then we can take a peek really quick in here. And again, it's going to look very, very similar. The workspace that you saw, instead of it being in Go this time, it's in TypeScript. And whether you like that more or less is a personal preference. But you could see here really simply, we brought in that project, that Hello Dagger project. We were interested in a base branch and a feature branch, so our main and our green. And then we used this fully loaded Cypress image that gave us all the Cypress tools we might need. Did a bunch of stuff, installed some other things in the container we needed for dev. And then what did we let it do? Well, we gave it a few functions also. We said, hey, you can read a file. You can write a file. And you can look around. Yeah, you can just basically, And to look around, we said you can run the find command in the Cypress directory. So I'm like, I don't want you to look at the whole project. Just look in there where you're supposed to be doing your work. And then I gave it a test that it could run. That was it, essentially, to run that little end-to-end test, something that's in the package JSON. Yeah. So yeah, to wrap up, to go back to the slides for just a second, and to kind of wrap up. Yeah, yeah. Oh, we'll grab a microphone for you. That'd be amazing. That way it gets on the recording for everybody.
Thanks. Hello? Okay. So I have a two-part question in having to do with testing. So when you when you run the CI and you're doing a test in CI, what you usually do is you publish it to like a JUnit format so that it could take the results and put it in the and put it in as part of the code review.
Yes.
So the thing is, but if I'm running that pipe, running the Dagger on my terminal locally, I want it to come as pretty, say on my screen.
Right.
So my thing is there a way, one in the function to say, well, if you're running it in the CI, create the file, but if I'm running it locally, do this. And then the second part is, because I think you said that the functions run within a container. So how does the file get outputted so that the CI can pick it up?
Yeah, that's great
publish
questions.
it?
Yeah, great question. So the way you could think about it is these are just functions, and it's just code, and it's just programming. So you can use if statements, you could use a case statement, you can use a for loop, you can use any of those constructs because it's just code at the end of the day. And you can also do things like you could say, oh, I'm going to upload this thing, like a JUnit, XML, or whatever. I can upload it to some kind of an artifact store, right? Because it's got networking as well. Right. So you can, anything you might want to do, you can also you could create, say, a custom type that is something that you output that's your test result type. And your test result type has, exactly what you need to pass on to the next stage of things.
Couldn't you just make a PR and get with the new file?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. If it was something like, say you were trying to create a new test like that, then you could also have that get into Git. You could output that from here into a separate directory. Again, that could be something you could upload and share and so forth. So yeah, super flexible just because it's all just code. So you can do anything. Yeah, great question. Other questions? Yeah, one up front here.
Our CI guy.
Yes.
Can you programmatically customize the container tags?
So yes. So kind of an example of that could be something like this. So say if you're going to be publishing containers. Yeah, so in this example that we had over here where I was in my hello Dagger, in my .dagger source. So here you could see in my publish, I was actually generating a new, a new name for this image. Now that could be colon whatever, right? It could be the tag. So yeah, again, it's just code, and so you have all the abilities that you have. And in fact, you can, since it's just code, you can also import anything you want. So say you have, a particular library that's important to you. It's like maybe there's some kind of cool Semver library or some kind of whatever you want to use. It's just code, so you can use any of that in there, mix and match. Yeah, any other questions?
Yes.
Awesome.
All right, get my steps in.
So the LLM stuff is interesting for sure, and the container workflow versus a Docker file seems much faster. For the replacement in CI/CD, where you drop in, Dagger instead of writing a big pipeline YAML for
Yes.
GitLab or something, how is that different than just bash and make?
Totally. Yeah. So so there's I think bash and make are classics for a good reason, right? Because you get a DAG, very similar. You get a graph. You get build targets. You get targets could be build or test or whatever, CI or whatever you want to name your targets. And you also get a lot of baggage, unfortunately, still because if you've written a lot of make files and you get all these phonies in there and all this and that, I mean, there are things about writing make files that are not delightful and intuitive for everyone. So the idea here is that the whole team, no matter what language you're familiar with or use, you could get involved and write Dagger and share it and use it together. That's also kind of speaks to the Bash thing. Even though Bash is really pretty universal and awesome, again, a lot of teams, there's like maybe a Bash guru or, that kind of thing, and it's not necessarily the case that everyone in the team is going to bust out some awesome Bash and get the fine points like, oh yeah, I got that Bash array perfect, or I got this, you start like messing around with that. You also don't have type safety in Bash, and so one of the really nice things is because it's all fully type safe, so I can go into here and I can be writing something and say, oh yeah, give me dag from this dot, check it out. These are all the things that are available on a container type, right? So it's all fully typed, so I can say, oh yeah, I say like, I want to say with new file, boom. And then so it makes it really, really easy to use in your IDE, which means that anyone on the team who knows the language, has an IDE hooked up, they don't even have to know the Dagger API very well. It's very intuitive. It just kind of starts working for them. So a couple of reasons why, for some teams, using something like Dagger and their own languages and this API, common API, might be better for them than Makefiles and Bash. But your mileage may vary, and Bash is awesome. Anybody else? Any other questions? Did that answer your question, more or less? Okay, thank you.
Let's say I'm part of a platform team and there's like 5 different TypeScript applications. They're similar where they have to test and push to a container registry. Would I have to do a Dagger init for every single project, or is there a way to kind of package this template?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of people like a monorepo pattern. So if you wanted, do you have that? Do you have like a monorepo with all those projects inside, or are they separate?
Just separate repos, and I kind of want to inherit this pattern of testing and deploying it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to copy and paste this into every single repo. How would I do this with Dagger?
Totally, yeah. So I think, a good pattern is the one kind of like we saw here. So like, for example, I could say I go into the Dagger shell without any particular module in place. What you can do is I think this would actually be an even better way of doing it than I think about. So like, remember we were inside of this particular project, and this is that Hello Dagger project that gave us the white button and the green button to push. So if I open up a shell in here, we had some functions, like we had a build function. And that build function was actually super reusable. The code for that was like pretty general for a certain class of project. And of course, you could have conditional statements inside of there so they could handle like all your projects. And it could be like, that build is your TypeScript build. And that is at the company, it's enshrined, this is what we use here at the company or in our group for our builds. And you can do things like, you can give it different inputs. So you could have one place where there's the build function, and then since it took source code as an argument, it could be that instead of living inside of one project, this module could live outside as its own project. And then right there, it could take as inputs the Git directory of your different projects. So like, for example, here we saw, like if I say build, build, and then I put in here, say, it could be a local directory, or it could be, in this case, that I want it to go to like github.com. There's a Dagger, hello Dagger. It's a totally different project, right? So I could have it go to zero positional arguments. Let's go do that again. Let's build that again with the source being that. So now it's actually reaching out across the internet to GitHub, to this other project. It's not the one I built earlier. It's the one that we used actually in the quick start. And it just pulled that in, and it's gonna try and run the same build function I was using for this other project on it. So this is like part of the power is that, and you could have this build function itself can be in GitHub, and you can say something like this. You can say, Dagger, I'm gonna use this other notation. You can say like, Dagger, use this module, the one I've been using, right? Hello, Dagger TypeScript. Use that module and then call the build function, but give it the source code of Dagger, hello Dagger, right? So this is now, I've got Dagger, I don't have TypeScript, I don't have anything. It is going out, it's grabbing a module that has these functions, these capabilities, then it's giving it another thing as input all off the internet without, so like you can just have a developer on their laptop run that. All they need to have would be Dagger, the ability to run Dagger, and they could run this same thing without having any of those tools locally. So that's how, and you know, being able to then jump into that and say, look, you just built the project, grab a terminal, now I can like jump into the project, inspect it, or I could like get a local dev, very much like a Docker compose situation or Docker run situation. I could like jump inside of this thing and look around. So yeah, that's, as a centralized team, you can maintain those centralized functions that could be used across. Other questions? These are great questions, by the way. So what do we think? Do we think that, like, now that we've like, I think we've converted some people here. So if like these folks just Daggerize like a couple things and like tell 10 people, or I think we'll be good. I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think we'll be good. So, yeah, one more question. Oh yeah, so the question was, how do we plug in your own models, going back to kind of the LLM piece? So I would encourage everybody to do this as soon as possible. Go to Dagger.io. The very first thing you need to do is go up here and click on Discord. The only reason I plug Discord so much is that's where we're all at. So if you saw Solomon's talk earlier, this is me like talking to Solomon, or if you know, whatever, you wanna like jump in here because this is like where all the action is happening. So definitely like jump in there, and everyone's talking about everything that's happening in Dagger. But also jump into the docs. So in the docs, you'll see whether your interest is more in the CI piece, you can take the quick start and kind of do the things we were doing, or you can go in this agents thing, and you'll see there's like information here and some of the different things that I showed off, like the Cypress one and the toy programmer here. We will add in more and more docs in here soon, but for LLM endpoints, you can put in, you know, we have support right now for a bunch of them. So you can add your API keys for like OpenAI, Anthropic. I think Gemini support is coming. I think we just shipped it maybe. And if you want to use local models like with Olama, you can do that as well. And yeah, it's like a simple config file or environment variables you can use, and it'll just get picked up and go from there. So yeah, in my case, I'm using OpenAI in mine, and I think in mine, I'm using OpenAI, and I'm also over here. Let me just quit out of here for a second. I think, oh, actually, in the other project that we were just in. Thanks for bearing with me, because this is the LLM-powered one. So I've got this .m file. I hope I don't have a key in here. No, I don't have a key. But what I have is I've got a reference to my 1Password account. And so we also have like built in like 1Password and Hashi Vault support. So you can just put like a reference to a key. Mine happens to be in my 1Password. And so when I run this and bring up, you probably saw before, but if I run this and then run, you know, LLM or something like that, then it's asking for my password now, my key to the LLM, and I could give it to it. So yeah, it's pretty easy to kind of hook up any LLMs that you want, and we're going to have more examples about multi-LLM, multi-model flows as well soon. Other questions? I think we're just about, we still got 5 minutes in case there are, but who's going to try Dagger? Yay! Okay, awesome. Yeah, definitely join Discord. I'm in there, Jeremy Adams. Just I don't have a fancy handle, but I'm just Jeremy Adams. I'm there, and so is the whole team. So we'd love to help you with whatever you want to build. And there's a whole community of other folks that are like-minded and building stuff right now in there. So see you soon. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.